Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Precariat Podcast. This is a podcast about class analysis from the average Joe's point of view, which happens to be me here. I'm going to tell you guys something that's going to really blow your mind. There are only three classes in America. There's the Precariat, there's the Reacher class, and there's the ownership class. And today I'm going to break all of this down. I find that this framework that I've sort of made works best for me and works best for how I see the world. So this is the framework we're going to use throughout the duration of this podcast. I think that this framework explains how power, money, and culture actually work in the United States. I guess this could apply to other Western countries, but I've only really lived in the United States, so I'm just going to focus on that sort of analysis. Though I'm sure I'm going to have listeners from all over the globe, and we welcome you. The Precariat are people living paycheck to paycheck, juggling rent, bills, and unstable jobs. We don't own any assets, but we own plenty of anxiety. We are the cultural and political pulse and backbone of the nation, but we are also the most disposable. You can't build wealth when every dollar is already spoken for. And if you ever had to choose between paying rent or paying down debt, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been there. Honestly, I am still there, and this is why this podcast happens to exist. The second class, I think, is the most vicious class, and it's the class that a lot of people are, and I think this is the only real middle class in the United States, and it is the Reacher class. The Reacher class are the strivers. They're people who have a house, a decent job, and maybe a little savings. But it's fragile. One medical bill, one layoff, one interest rate hike, and they can slide right back into being precariat. They are chasing stability, but the milestones keep moving further away. Think about millennials or Gen Z who finally buy a house, but it's with a 7% mortgage or in a neighborhood their parents would have avoided. They got the title, but not the security. In this class, they often travel at least 2 times a year. Maybe it's an international flight, maybe it's a domestic flight, but at least 2 times a year, I think. They go on vacation. And because many in this Reacher class, they can be owners, they can have houses and stuff, they can have condos, they can live in, rent-controlled areas or whatever, I don't know. But the thing is, they have some leverage in the system compared to the Precariat. They use their ability, I won't say all of them, but they use their ability to travel as their way to flex to a certain degree. Whether it's putting Instagram-worthy pictures of their vacations, or whether it's going to a different country, or whether it's the stamps on their passport. That's their way of flexing as the Reacher/Striver class, or quote-unquote middle class, in my opinion. But how America is going, how inflation is, I think these people are upper middle class to a degree. Next is the ownership class. There's the ownership class. They've got assets, real estate, stocks, businesses. They don't work for money. Their money works for them. They've insulated themselves from shocks in the system. They shape policy. They influence culture. They live in a different world entirely. While we argue about cutting lattes, they're buying starter homes with cash. And let's get back to the historical part of this, and let's talk a little bit about history. The ownership class to America's DNA. Here's the most important part, and here's the kicker. This isn't anything new. The ownership class has been venerated since America's founding. One of our major founding fathers who created the Bill of Rights, James Madison, was one of the Constitution's architects and believed that protecting property was just as important as protecting liberty. They were a 1-to-1. Before Jefferson softened it, the phrase wasn't life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was life, liberty, and property. And there's the U.S. Senate. Madison designed it as the chamber that represented the wealth and property of the nation, while the House represented the people. In other words, from day one, our system baked in a permanent advantage for the ownership class. It was meant to protect them from the masses. Let's bring it back to now here. Fast forward to today. That DNA has not changed. We still bend our politics around protecting assets and property values, while the precariat and reachers are told to fend for themselves. This system was built to elevate ownership, and we're still living in that blueprint. Yeah, so these are like the big wigs. These are like the Jeff Bezoses of the world. These are the small business people that own several condos or whatever and make money through rent. Or these are people that are self-employed a lot of the time. So there you have it. So there's the precariat, the reachers, and the owners. 3 classes, 3 different realities, 1 country. Over the weeks ahead, we'll dive deeper into how these classes live, struggle, and clash, and what it means for our future. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe and share it. Like, share, and subscribe. This is just the beginning of the Precariat Podcast, where we give language to the struggle and map out the world and reality and how it really is. Ciao, and see you guys later.